Hey, so tonight, we're going to talk about something that'll make you really appreciate that hot shower you had today. We're diving into Victorian hygiene. And trust me, it's going to be quite the journey. Think elegant dresses and tall hats. Yeah. But let's just say that what was happening underneath those beautiful clothes wasn't quite as elegant. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a like or maybe even subscribe. I'm always fascinated to know where you're all listening from. So drop a comment with your city and what time it is there. It always amazes me that people are drifting off to sleep to this all across the world. All right, find that cozy spot. Take a slow, deep breath and let your body melt into whatever you're resting on. We're heading back to London, somewhere around 1850-something. And by the time we're done, you'll be deeply thankful for your mattress. Congratulations, you've just awakened in Victorian London. The first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you smell. That thick, heavy, almost sticky air that seems to coat your throat, like someone gathered every scent you've ever tried to avoid and simmered them all together in a steaming pot. Human waste, rotting rubbish, smoke from thousands of coal fires, and something else, something oddly sweet, sickly, wrong, but impossible to name. You shift in your bed, whatever kind of bed you're lucky enough to have, and instantly feel how foreign everything is. The sheets, if you even have sheets, are rough against your skin, scratchy, nothing like the soft cotton you're used to. And the smell, well, let's just say fabric softener won't exist for another 100 years. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Almost everything else. Let's start with where you are. If you're poor, and most people were, you're probably sharing a room with 6, maybe 8 other people, family, strangers. It doesn't matter. Privacy is a luxury only the very wealthy can afford. The room, maybe 10 by 12 feet. That's it. And everyone's just breathing each other's air, sharing each other's everything. The walls are always damp. There's a greenish fuzz growing in the corners that no one mentions, but everyone silently notices. Your breathing slows a little, in and out, as you take in this strange, fragrant new reality. If you're middle class, and lucky you if that's the case, things are marginally better. You might have your own bedroom, maybe even your own bed, but better is relative. There's no running water, no electricity, and that bathroom you're picturing? Yeah, not exactly a thing yet. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Everyone in this era thinks they're clean, like genuinely believes they're keeping good hygiene. It's just that their definition of clean, let's say, is rather unique. Take bathing, that long, warm, relaxing shower you had. The one where you shampooed your hair and scrubbed your whole body? Yeah, forget it. Not happening. If you told someone back then that you took a full bath every single day, they'd probably think you'd lost your mind. You let out a soft sigh, because even thinking about their bathing habits makes you cherish your hot shower just a little more. See, Victorians believed that bathing too often was dangerous. Like medically risky. Too much water, they thought, would weaken your constitution, make you ill, maybe even end your life. So, most people, they took a full bath once a week, if they were lucky. If they were poor, maybe once a month. Maybe. But here's the surprising part. They weren't just walking around filthy. They had a system. It was called a sponge bath. Basically, you'd wash the essential areas: face, hands, armpits, and the delicate bits. Everything else could wait until bath day. Picture it. You're standing in your bedroom because that's where most people washed, next to a wooden stand with a bowl and a pitcher of cold water. Cold. Because hot water on demand, that's practically sorcery. You pour the water into the bowl, grab a cloth, or maybe a sponge, and you just spot clean, like you're detailing a car, only the car is you, and the detailing is minimal. Your shoulders gently drop, releasing tension, as you imagine how different their mornings must have felt. Now, the wealthy folks, they had it a bit easier. Some of them owned fancy copper bathtubs, and their servants would haul hot water up from the kitchen, but even they weren't bathing daily, maybe twice a week, if they were real hygiene enthusiasts. And get this, multiple people would often share the same bath water. Dad would go first, then mom, and finally, the children, one by one, oldest to youngest. By the time little Billy had his turn, well, let's just say it resembled soup more than water. Thick, cloudy, and already well used. There were even guidebooks teaching people how to bathe. Can you imagine? Bathing for beginners. But in 1858, these manuals had serious rules. Apparently, bathing the wrong way could be dangerous, like this one. Don't wash your face while traveling unless you can disinfect the water first, with alcohol or ammonia. Or try Russian baths. Scald your face with very hot water, then immediately shock it with ice-cold water. Supposedly, it prevents wrinkles. You're getting more settled now, sinking deeper into your mattress. And honestly, their bathing tips sound exhausting. Now, let's talk about teeth. Oh yes, let's talk about teeth. Toothbrushes did exist, but they were expensive. And how shall I put this? Not great. They had wooden handles, and the bristles, stiff animal hair, really rough. Imagine brushing your teeth with a tiny scrub brush, the kind that costs as much as a week's groceries. So what did poor people do? They improvised. Some just chewed celery and hoped it worked. Others made homemade toothpaste, using chalk, soot, even ground up cuttlefish bone. Yes, cuttlefish bone. In your mouth. On purpose. And if you got a toothache, well, good luck. There weren't many dentists around. So where did you go? To the barber or the blacksmith. The same person who cut your hair or shoed horses was now digging around inside your mouth with whatever tools were lying around. No anesthesia, no formal training. Just grit your teeth. Try not to scream. A soft yawn escapes you now, and you suddenly feel deeply thankful for modern dental care. Hair washing? That was another adventure. Remember, no shampoo. So what did they use? Eggs. Yes, eggs. Women would crack raw eggs over their heads and work the yolks into their hair like they were making breakfast, on their scalp. Then rinse it out with pitchers of cold water. The smell must have been something. Other popular mixtures included vinegar with water, black tea, rum, or rosemary. Basically, if it came from the kitchen and was liquid, someone tried putting it in their hair. Wealthy people had fancier mixtures, but still, they were mostly mixing ingredients at home, just like everyone else. And the twist? They only washed their hair once a month. Maybe. Women's hair was seen as their crowning achievement, so they'd pile it into elaborate styles and leave it that way for weeks. To keep it healthy, they used oils and pomades. But over time, those oils would go rancid, so their beautiful hair smelled like spoiled fat. Lovely, right? You shift slightly, finding a more comfortable position. as you reflect on how utterly different their daily lives must have been. Now, laundry. A whole other story. No washing machines, everything done by hand. And soap was expensive, so people got creative. Oil stains, scrubbed out with chalk, blood and grass, removed with kerosene, and odors, sometimes masked with milk. But for whitening fabrics, they'd soak clothes in human urine, because urine contains ammonia, and ammonia is a decent cleaner, but still, it's urine. The whole process took hours. You'd haul water, heat it over a fire, scrub clothes by hand, rinse them, then hang them up to dry. A full wash could take an entire day, literally, all day long. So most people only did laundry once a week, if they were lucky. Many went longer, which meant people wore the same outfits for days, sometimes weeks. That elegant Victorian costume you're picturing, chances are, it hadn't been cleaned in a while. Take a soft breath in and out, just imagining the effort it took to stay even slightly clean. Let's talk about underwear, or rather, the lack of it. Most poor people didn't wear undergarments at all. Nothing. The wealthy might own linen underwear, but even those weren't changed very frequently. And women's clothing? Oh, that's a whole other topic. Layers upon layers of heavy fabric, corsets that hadn't been cleaned in ages, and petticoats that, well, let's not even go there. All of it. Absorbing sweat, body odor, food, smoke, the street air, everything. And it just stayed there, trapped in the threads, until laundry day came around. And remember, that might be weeks away. So picture it, a summer stroll down a London street. Hundreds of people, all wearing heavy, unwashable clothes, all smelling like themselves, plus breakfast, plus smoke from coal fires, plus horse manure from the roads, plus, well, you get it. The scent would be overwhelming, a physical presence, like something you could actually taste, in the air, with every breath. Your breathing slows again, settling deeper into this strange, unwashed world, where just staying clean was a battle nobody really won. And that was just personal hygiene. We haven't even gotten to the streets yet. Oh, the streets. London in the 1850s was home to around 2 million people. That's a lot of people, making a lot of mess. There was no organized garbage pickup, no regular street cleaning. People simply threw their trash out the window, into the road, where it would sit, rot, and attract rats. As for human waste, that's a whole story of its own. Most homes didn't have bathrooms. Instead, people used chamber pots. You'd do your business in a pot beneath the bed, and someone had to empty it, usually into the street, or a shared outdoor toilet, or if they were feeling lazy, just out the window. There were people called night soil men. Their job was to empty cesspools and privies, but only at night, because the task was considered too revolting for daylight, and all that waste, most of it, ended up in the Thames, London's main river, the same one people drank from. Yeah, just think about that for a moment. You sink a bit deeper into your mattress, muscles loosening, as you imagine a world where the river that quenches your thirst is also the sewer for the entire city. And it wasn't just people. The horses made it worse. London was fueled by horsepower. Carriages, delivery carts, omnibuses, all drawn by horses. And horses, well, they relieve themselves. A lot. It's estimated that a single horse produced around 35 pounds of manure per day. Now multiply that by thousands, all of it, piling up, day after day. When it rained, it became rivers of filth. When it was dry, it baked under the sun, turning into clouds of dust. Dust that, well, you didn't want to inhale, but people did. Every day, they walked through it, lived in it, breathed it in, and they thought it was normal, because everyone smelled the same. When filth is everywhere, filth becomes ordinary. You're more relaxed now, muscles sinking into the bed, grateful for a time with hot water, soap, and actual garbage removal. The thing is, Victorians weren't ignorant. They knew things were unpleasant. They just didn't fully understand why people kept getting sick. They followed something called the miasma theory, the idea that bad smells caused illness, that if something smelled foul, it could make you ill. And honestly, they weren't completely wrong. Foul smells usually meant poor sanitation, and poor sanitation often meant disease. But they blamed the odor itself, not the actual cause behind it. So what did they do? Perfume. Lots of perfume. Instead of fixing the source of the problem, they masked it. The wealthy doused themselves in elegant fragrances. The poor used whatever they could find, cheap cologne, flowers, herbs. But here's the catch. When you try to cover up the scent of sweat, dirty clothes, and sewage-covered streets, it doesn't disappear. It becomes something worse. A thick, nauseating combination of sweet and rot, like vanilla air freshener mixed with a portable toilet. That's how the upper class smelled, most of the time. You breathe in slowly and exhale with a quiet sigh, thankful, so thankful, for modern hygiene. Women had it especially hard. Their clothing was even more layered, more complex, layer upon layer of heavy fabric, corsets so tight they made breathing a struggle, long skirts dragging along dirty roads, picking up everything in their path, and still, they were expected to look flawless. Makeup did exist, but it was often toxic. Face powder, frequently made, rouge often contained mercury. And since people didn't fully understand what these chemicals could do to the human body, many Victorian women were, quite literally, poisoning themselves in the name of beauty. Hair dye was even worse. There was a very popular product called Hall's Hair Renewer. It claimed to hide gray hair, restore youthful color. Its secret ingredient? Lead. People were massaging lead into their scalps and wondering why they felt so unwell all the time. Your shoulders lower, releasing another layer of tension. As you reflect on how much we've learned about chemistry and safety. And then there were the beauty routines. With no modern skincare, people got creative. Lemon juice to lighten freckles, butter to soften dry skin, raw meat used as facial masks. They'd actually sleep with slices of beef on their faces, believing it would preserve their youth. The smell in a wealthy Victorian bedroom must have been complicated. Raw meat, lead-based makeup, unwashed hair treated with rancid oils, layered with perfume trying desperately to hide it all. But you know what? They adapted. They found ways to feel beautiful and clean within the limits of their world. And honestly, it's kind of admirable. They worked with what they had, doing the best they could with the knowledge they possessed. You're getting cozy now, settling in, and there's something almost inspiring about that resourcefulness, even if the results were sometimes questionable. The wealthy, of course, had help. Maids to carry out chamber pots, laundresses to handle clothes, bath attendants to heat and transport water. But the servants? They were often even less clean than the people they worked for. They simply didn't have the time to care for themselves while caring for everyone else. Poorer folks just made do, shared what they had, helped each other out. They accepted that being truly clean was a luxury they couldn't afford. They focused on surviving, finding food, finding work, finding warmth. Hygiene was something you worried about after you had everything else figured out. And in 1850-something London, most people didn't. Breathing deeply now, nice and slow, as you imagine trying to live in a world where everything was just a bit harder, where taking a bath was an entire event, where brushing your teeth was a privilege, where cleanliness was a never-ending fight against a dirty, chaotic world. And the funny thing is, they probably would have thought we were the odd ones. Daily showers, fresh clothes every day, washing our hands all the time. To them, we might seem obsessed. They would have worried we were washing away our natural defenses, making ourselves fragile, vulnerable, different times, different science, different values. But underneath all the dirt and all the strange hygiene habits, they were still people, still families, trying to carve out a decent life for themselves and for their children. They fell in love, laughed at jokes, stressed about money, celebrated birthdays. They had dreams and fears, just like we do. They just smelled a bit worse while doing it. You sink deeper, that heavy, peaceful sensation spreading through your body, as this strange, grimy world begins to feel oddly human, oddly real, despite all the discomfort and challenge. But now, let's talk about something that'll really make you grateful for modern plumbing. Victorian toilets. Or rather, the absence of them. You know that bathroom down the hall? With water and toilet paper and a soft, familiar seat? Yeah, forget all of that. Most Victorians had never seen anything like it. Instead, they had other options. Your muscles release again, thinking how easy it is to simply walk to the restroom. Back then, if you were poor, and most were, you might share an outhouse with 100 other families. Picture that. One wooden shack, built over a deep pit, in a shared courtyard behind a row of homes. No privacy, no paper, no way to clean your hands afterward. Just a hole in the ground, with a wooden seat on top. And the smell, oh my goodness, the smell, especially in summer. It was like walking into a wall, thick, hot, suffocating. And the flies, so many flies. They'd gather around the opening, buzzing, swarming, and you just have to endure it. A quiet yawn escapes, and suddenly you feel very grateful for indoor plumbing. The wealthy had it easier, but only slightly. They had something called a water closet, basically an early toilet installed inside the home. Sounds elegant, right? Well, here's the problem. They didn't have real plumbing. So where did all that waste go? Straight into a cesspool in the basement. Yes, an open pit of human waste, right underneath the house, just sitting there, fermenting. The idea was simple. Eventually, someone would come and empty it. But that didn't always happen on time. When the cesspool filled up, the odor would start creeping up through the floorboards, and the whole house would reek. People woke up feeling nauseated, drenched in fumes that had built up overnight. So, they'd call the night soil men. These were the specialists. Their job? To empty cesspools and privies. But they only worked at night, because the job was considered too vile to witness during the day. Just imagine, work so revolting, it was illegal to do it in daylight. Your breathing slows again, as you try to picture life above a sewage pit. The night soil men would arrive, with shovels, with buckets, and they'd dig, hauling human waste from the basement, bucket by bucket, loading it onto wooden carts. The stench during all this? Indescribable. Neighbors would slam their windows shut, stuff rags under their doors, but the smell still found a way in. So where did all this waste go? Here's the strange part. Human waste was actually valuable. Farmers needed fertilizer, and city waste made excellent fertilizer. So the night soil men would sell it. They hauled it outside the city to farms and spread it across fields, which meant the vegetables you ate for dinner were often grown in soil, rich with the waste of people dying from cholera, typhoid, and other less nameable things. The cycle was, well, unsettling. You nestle in a little deeper, getting more comfortable, appreciating modern farming a whole lot more. But even that system was beginning to fail. By the 1850s, London had become too large, too many people, too much waste. The night soil crews simply couldn't keep up. Cesspools were overflowing, sewage was flooding the streets when it rained, and disease spread like wildfire. People grew desperate. Some gave up entirely on the cesspools. They dumped chamber pots directly onto the streets, out the windows, into the nearest stream or river. And here's the twist. All those streams, all those drains, led to the Thames, London's main source of drinking water. So yes, people were drinking water contaminated by their own sewage, and wondering why they kept getting sick. Your shoulders release again, letting go of tension, because now, the connection seems so obvious. The government knew, scientists knew, and quite frankly, anyone with a functioning nose knew. But nobody could agree on what to do about it. Some proposed more cesspools. Others wanted to dump everything into the Thames and let the current carry it away. Still others suggested simply tolerating it. After all, London had always smelled bad. Why change now? And then came the summer of 1858. Oh yes, the summer of that year. It was hot, unusually hot. The kind of heat London rarely saw, day after day, of blazing sun. No rain. The Thames began to run low, its banks lined with thick sludge, layers of rotting sewage. And in that heat, the sludge began to ferment. The smell? Beyond description. Imagine every terrible scent you've ever encountered. Now multiply that smell by 1,000. And then imagine having to breathe it all day, every day, without escape. People were vomiting just from walking near the river. Families packed up and left, abandoning their homes if they lived too close to the Thames. A gentle sigh escapes you, and suddenly you're deeply grateful for modern waste systems. The newspapers began calling it the Great Stink, and it was great, in the most horrible way. Even Charles Dickens wrote about it. He called the Thames a deadly sewer in place of a fine, fresh river. Scientists took boat rides along the water, dropping small slips of white paper in to measure just how filthy it was. The paper vanished instantly, swallowed by the brown, soupy muck. But you know what finally pushed the government to act? The smell reached Parliament. The Houses of Parliament sit right on the river's edge. And during the summer of 1858, with the windows wide open for air, the stench poured in. Members of Parliament fled the chamber, handkerchiefs pressed to their faces, gagging, retching. They tried soaking the curtains in lime and dousing everything with chloride. It didn't help. They even discussed relocating the entire government away from Westminster. That's how unbearable it was. The odor was so revolting. They were prepared to walk away from their newly built, expensive government building rather than endure it. Finally, they agreed to do something. Your body relaxes more deeply now, just letting the story wash over you. Because sometimes, it takes a crisis to spark real change. They handed the job to a man named Joseph Bazalgette. Poor guy. Can you even imagine that assignment? Hey, Joe, we need you to figure out what to do with 2.5 million people's waste, and we need it done yesterday. But Bazalgette was a genius, and he proposed something bold. He didn't want to patch the old system. He wanted to build a new sewer system for the entire city from scratch. His plan? Over 1,000 miles of new underground sewers beneath London's streets, all of them connecting to massive intercepting sewers that would carry the waste far away from the city, downstream, 8 miles downstream to be exact, where it would be released into the Thames at high tide. The scale of this was unthinkable. They had to tear up half the city, demolish entire neighborhoods, relocate thousands of families, build enormous pumping stations to move waste uphill, lay millions of bricks, and reshape the riverbanks to hide and protect the new system. Your breath slows again, steady, calm, as you picture the sheer effort behind it all. It took years of building, years of noise, years of endless disruption. Streets dug up across the city, the air filled with the scent of cement and the ever-present stench of sewage. Workers coated in mud, and worse, digging deep into the earth. And the cost. Oh, the cost. In today's money, billions, possibly tens of billions. The government had to raise taxes, issue bonds, borrow heavily from banks. People complained about the expense endlessly. But it worked. When the new system finally launched, the transformation was immediate. The smell vanished. The Thames flowed clearer. Disease rates dropped. People could walk along the river without covering their mouths. It felt like magic. After years of living in filth, it was suddenly gone. You settle even deeper into your bed, feeling that heavy, comforting weight, and imagining how incredible it must have felt to finally breathe. Clean air. The new system wasn't perfect, of course. They were still dumping raw sewage into the Thames, just farther downstream, where it became someone else's issue. And sometimes, the pumping stations would break down, causing backups, overflows. But compared to what they'd been living with, it was a miracle. Unfortunately, not everyone benefited equally. The wealthy neighborhoods were connected to the new system first. The poor districts, they had to wait, sometimes for years. So while the rich enjoyed fresh air and dry streets, the poor were still dealing with flooded cesspools and sewage oozing through the roads. Some things never seemed to change, but gradually, even the poorest areas began to see improvement. As more streets were connected, public health improved. Cholera outbreaks became less frequent. Typhoid rates declined. People stopped dying from illnesses that were completely preventable. A soft yawn escapes you, and you reflect on how much we now take for granted. Clean water, toilets that flush, toilet paper. Speaking of toilet paper, yeah, that wasn't really a thing yet. The first mass-produced rolls weren't sold until the 1870s, and even then, they were pricey and not widely used. So, what did people use instead? Whatever they could find. Old newspapers were common among the middle class, corn cobs in rural places, leaves if you were lucky, washable rags. The rich might have soft cloths, or even sponges, But for most folks, it was just whatever was around. And since there was rarely running water nearby, well, hand washing after using the toilet wasn't exactly standard procedure. Which brings us right back to disease. So much disease. Cholera was the great killer. It moved through London in waves, taking thousands of lives each time. Poor neighborhoods were hit the hardest. Their sanitation was the worst. But the illness didn't care about wealth. The rich got sick too, and doctors had no idea why. Remember, this was all before germ theory, before we knew that bacteria and viruses were the invisible cause of disease. Back then, people believed cholera came from bad air, from breathing in the stench of garbage and sewage. Your muscles soften, sinking further into the mattress, as you imagine living in a world where death came suddenly, and no one understood why. So, doctors got creative. They tried to cleanse the air with strong-smelling herbs. They burned sulfur or tar, creating thick smoke that was supposed to chase illness away. They gave patients enormous doses of alcohol or opium, thinking it might help fight infection. None of it worked. People kept dying. Entire families wiped out in a single outbreak. Children, especially vulnerable. And all the while, the sewage kept flowing into the Thames, the same river that people still drank from. But there was one man, a physician named John Snow. He saw the pattern, and he made the connection. He realized that cholera wasn't coming from the air. It was in the water, contaminated drinking water, sewage-tainted wells. That was the true culprit. He proved it, but no one believed him. The medical community thought he was mad. It wasn't until years later, after the Great Stink and after the sewer overhaul, that people began to take him seriously. By then, thousands had already died. You breathe in slowly and out, imagining the frustration of having the answer, and no one willing to hear it. Even after the new sewers were built, old habits were hard to break. People were so used to dumping waste wherever was easiest that they just kept doing it. Chamber pots still flew out of windows. Garbage still got tossed into the streets. Factories still poured waste into the rivers. It took a full generation for that mindset to begin to change, to understand that where you throw your waste matters, that rivers weren't meant to carry away the consequences. They were water sources that many people relied on. The new sewer network helped, but it wasn't a perfect fix. It was more like a really strong beginning, a foundation that future generations could build upon, and build they certainly did. In the decades that followed, London continued enhancing its sanitation systems. They constructed treatment stations, they improved pumps, they extended services to more communities. They began regulating what industries were allowed to discharge. Slowly, very slowly, London changed from one of the most polluted cities in the world to one of the most pristine. Your breath naturally deepens, settling into that warm, weighty calm as you reflect on the extraordinary transformation that took place in just a few decades. The irony? All of this progress, the tunnels, the filtration, the oversight, is almost invisible to us now. You twist a knob, clean water flows, you flush, and it's gone. You stroll down the street, and it doesn't reek of waste. We don't think about it, because it works so effortlessly, because people like Basil Gett did their job with such care and precision that we can forget it exists at all. But for the Victorians, especially before the reforms, dealing with human waste was a struggle. Every single day, each trip to the privy, an unpleasant challenge. Every sip of water, a calculated risk. Every breath, carried the odor of sickness and rot. They endured it because they had no alternative. They believed that's simply how urban life worked. More comfortable now, your muscles melting into the mattress, grateful for the hidden systems that quietly support modern life. Even their clothing reflected the reality of living in a messy world. Dark colors were common. They concealed marks more easily. Heavy textiles were favored. They could go longer without washing. Intricate patterns masked spills and smears. Fashion wasn't just about elegance. It was about survival, about maintaining appearances. In a world where staying clean was nearly impossible, women's long skirts weren't just stylish, they were tactical. They concealed muddy shoes and stockings. They brushed along the ground, collecting filth, but protected the legs from exposure. Men's dark suits did the same. Coal dust, manure, sewage splatter, all of it vanished into the folds of black wool. A gentleman could stride through the filth and still appear reasonably clean when he reached his destination. That's it. Nice and calm, letting the thought settle in that every part of their lives was shaped by the dirt that surrounded them. And yet, they carried on, they smiled, they danced, they created beauty. Despite the mess, they wrote verse, painted scenes, composed melodies. They fell in love, raised children, lived lives full of hope, just with a little more sewage. The shift that took place in the Victorian age, from disorder to cleanliness, marked one of the greatest public health triumphs in all of human history. It saved countless lives. It made the modern city possible. And it proved that with the right mix of vision and determination, even our dirtiest challenges can be overcome. Your body feels heavier now, comfortable, secure, reflecting on the resilience and brilliance of those who stared down the impossible and built something lasting. But let's pause on something that shows how profoundly different life was: women's hygiene. During their menstrual cycles, those convenient items you can grab at any store today, made for comfort and confidence, yeah, they didn't exist at all. Your body relaxes further as you consider how much easier things are now, even for the most basic, natural parts of life. Victorian women had to improvise, and by improvise, we mean they truly had to adapt. Most used cloth rags, torn strips from old linens or garments. They folded them, arranged them, and simply hoped for the best. Reusable, yes, which was helpful because fabric was expensive. But cleaning them? That was its own ordeal. First, rinse in cold water. Hot water set the stains. Then scrub with whatever soap you could afford. And finally, hang them to dry. But where? You couldn't hang them outside, not where the neighbors might see. So instead, they dried them indoors, bedrooms, basements, closets, quiet places where they wouldn't invite shame. And that was daily life. Harder, slower, but filled with people doing their best. And because they did, we get to rest. They were water sources that others depended on. The new sewer system helped, but it wasn't a total solution. It was more like a strong beginning, a base that future generations could build upon. A soft sigh escapes, and suddenly, you feel profoundly thankful for modern comforts. Wealthy women had it a bit easier. They could afford softer materials, maybe even cloths made specifically for that purpose. But still, it was essentially the same routine. Rags, Washington Roos, repeat. The very wealthy might have had servants to handle the cleaning, but that also meant your most private hygiene was now public knowledge in the servants' quarters. Privacy was almost non-existent when it came to personal care. And here's where it gets stranger. Doctors of the era had some truly bizarre ideas about menstruation. They believed it was tied to hysteria, that women became temporarily unbalanced during their monthly cycle. Treatments, cold baths, bloodletting, and yes, mercury. Mercury, the same toxic metal we now avoid at all costs. Back then, it was prescribed for menstrual cramps. Your breath slows, settling deeper, as you consider how little was understood about the female body. The first disposable menstrual products didn't appear until the late 1800s, and even then, they were far from ideal. Early tampons were just wads of cotton, no applicators. Pads were bulky, thick, and strapped around the waist with belts. They were also expensive, too expensive for most women. So the rag system continued well into the 20th century. But by then, people were starting to understand. Menstruation wasn't madness, or weakness, or shameful. It was natural, and women didn't need to be hidden or treated like they were sick. Progress, slow, but real. Speaking of medicine, Victorian healthcare. Let's call it experimental. Doctors didn't really know what caused most illnesses, so their cures were guesses. Educated ones, perhaps, but still guesses, and some of them were terrifying. Take bloodletting, for example. Doctors believed that too much blood caused disease, so they drained it. Leeches, cuts to the arms, special heated cups to draw blood through the skin. Weakness must be extra blood. Headache, too much again. Broken bone, sure, why not? Still, too much blood. Easy now. Just breathing gently. Imagining how frightening it must have felt to fall ill in a world where the cure might be more dangerous than the sickness itself. Mercury was their miracle drug. Doctors prescribed it for nearly everything. Syphilis, sadness, constipation, teething in babies. If something was wrong, mercury was the go-to. The problem? Mercury is incredibly toxic. It damages the brain, destroys kidneys, causes birth defects. But they didn't know that. They just knew it seemed to do something. The fact that it was slowly poisoning their patients? That came later. Someone would go to a doctor with a minor issue and leave with mercury poisoning, which created new symptoms. That required more treatments, often involving more mercury. A vicious loop that likely harmed more people than it ever helped. Opium was another favorite, for everything. Can't sleep? Opium. Pain? Opium. Crying baby? Opium. Yes. They gave it to infants, regularly. There were even medicines marketed specifically for teething babies that were just opium syrup. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup was wildly popular among mothers because it worked. Immediately. Babies stopped crying. They relaxed. But what they didn't realize was how dangerously strong that syrup truly was. Your shoulders sink, letting go of tension, as you reflect on just how risky daily life once was when no one fully understood what they were putting in their bodies. The thing is, opium did work. It soothed pain, helped with sleep, eased the nerves, but it was also incredibly addictive. Victorian England had a massive opium dependency issue, partly because doctors prescribed it for nearly everything, and partly because people could buy it freely at any pharmacy. You could walk into a chemist's shop and purchase laudanum, liquid opium, the same way you'd buy aspirin today. No prescription, no questions. Housewives took it for cramps and became addicted without realizing. Workers used it for backaches and couldn't stop. Children were given it for colds and formed dependencies before they could even speak. and no one really understood why people kept needing more. Addiction wasn't seen as illness. It was viewed as a moral weakness. Getting more comfortable now, your muscles relaxing further, as you reflect on just how far medicine has come. Surgery back then was almost a death sentence. There was no true anesthesia until the very late Victorian period. And even then, it was dangerous and unpredictable. So most surgeries were performed with the patient wide awake, held down by assistants, while the surgeon worked as quickly as humanly possible. Imagine having a tooth pulled or a leg amputated while feeling everything. They'd give you a strap to bite down on and maybe a shot of whiskey. That was the entire pain management plan. You only agreed to surgery if the alternative was certain death. And even if you survived the operation, infection was likely. Doctors didn't know they needed to wash their hands or clean their instruments. They'd examine a corpse, then move directly to surgery without rinsing their fingers. Hospital infections killed more people than the original wounds. In many cases, staying home and hoping for the best was the safer option. A slow yawn escapes, and you're quietly grateful for modern hospitals and sterile procedures. Dentistry, though? It was even worse. Most people lived with constant tooth pain until the teeth either fell out or the suffering became unbearable. When they finally sought care, it almost always meant extraction. No numbing agents, just crude tools and a pair of strong arms. The dentist, who might be the local barber or blacksmith, would grab hold and yank the tooth free as you screamed. The wealthy had another option, false teeth, but they weren't much better. Early dentures were carved from wood, or made using the teeth of the dead, or even animals. They didn't fit well, they made eating difficult, and they decayed rapidly. George Washington famously wore several pairs. His final set? Hippo ivory and gold wire. Can you imagine trying to chew with hippo teeth wired into your jaw? Most folks simply went without teeth. They ate soft meals, spoke with a mumble, and looked decades older than they really were. Your breath deepens, sinking further into the story, appreciating how much modern dental care has changed. But here's something curious. Even with all these medical hardships, people still wanted to look good. Beauty mattered, and people went to extraordinary lengths to meet the standards of their day. Pale skin was a sign that you didn't work in the sun, so women covered up. Parasols, long gloves, veils, and if that wasn't enough, they used makeup. Lead-based powder was hugely popular. It created that smooth, ghost-white look everyone wanted. The fact that lead was poisonous wasn't yet understood. Women literally applied it daily, not realizing it was killing them. Rouge often contained mercury. Lipstick held traces of lead. Eyeliner made with antimony, which could cause blindness. Getting ready for a party meant layering your face in toxins and hoping you didn't feel sick before midnight. That's it. Nice and steady, muscles melting into the mattress, as you reflect on the irony of trying to look healthy while unknowingly damaging your body. Hair care was another challenge. Without the modern products we know today, women had to innovate. They used sugar water to hold curls in place, sometimes even beer, to add shine and volume. At night, they wrapped their hair around cloth or sticks to create waves. And remember, hair washing was rare. Once a month, if that. So, all those styling products, they stayed, layer after layer, of sugar, pomade, powder, and more, built up over time, until it became a kind of helmet encasing their heads. The scent must have been layered, sweet, sour, and rotten, all at once. Wealthy women sometimes wore elaborate wigs instead of styling their natural hair. And these wigs? They were miniature sculptures, towering pieces adorned with feathers, jewels, even tiny gardens or sailing ships. But wigs brought their own issues. They were hot, they were heavy, and they invited lice and worse. Maintaining them was costly. You had to visit a specialist to get them cleaned and refreshed. And if you wore the same wig for weeks, well, your scalp underneath didn't get much air or cleaning. Scalp infections became a common price of fashion. Your body feels heavier now, sinking deeper. As you imagine the discomfort of wearing a heavy, insect-ridden headdress just to look stylish. Men had their own grooming dilemmas. Shaving meant using a straight razor, essentially a knife. No guards, no electricity, just you, and a blade sharp enough to end you if your hand slipped. Some men went to barbers, but that meant sharing razors with dozens of other clients. Razors that weren't cleaned, let alone sterilized. You could go in for a clean shave and leave with someone else's skin condition. Wealthier men might have their own razors, but keeping them sharpened, keeping them clean, that was its own constant burden. Facial hair became popular, not just for style, but because it was safer than shaving daily. A trimmed beard was easier than risking your face with steel every morning. The downside? Facial hair trapped everything. Bits of food, tobacco smoke, dust, and whatever floated through Victorian air. Mustaches acted like filters for a very grimy world. A quiet sigh escapes as you reflect on how much safer and simpler modern grooming routines have become. In some places, public baths began to catch on. It was a major step forward for those without bathtubs at home. Large shared pools where people could bathe together. But they came with complications. The water wasn't replaced often. There were no chemicals, no filtration. People with rashes, infections, illnesses, all used the same water. So while public baths were better than nothing, they also spread disease quite efficiently. Still, they were welcomed. For many, it was the only chance to get truly clean. Some workers saved up coins to visit once a week, or once a month. It was more than just hygiene. It was social. People talked, shared stories, even negotiated business. It was like a community gathering, only you were nude in murky water with strangers. Easy now, just breathing, and reflecting on how different norms were when privacy was rare and precious. Despite everything, people found ways to feel good about themselves. They created their own definitions of cleanliness. A clean face, clean hands, good breath. They valued appearance even if the rest of the body wasn't so fresh. They worked with what they had and adapted. They adjusted to smells that would repel us today. They tolerated discomfort in ways we can barely imagine. And honestly, that kind of resilience is remarkable. These people were deeply resourceful. They lived lives filled with love, laughter, and meaning, even in conditions we would label unlivable. Your muscles let go, further and deeper, as you think about human endurance and the mind's ability to adjust to any world. Children grew up in this world, and to them, it was normal. They played in alleys filled with waste and soot. They helped with laundry, with chamber pots, with the gritty details of survival. But they still played. They told stories. They laughed. They imagined. They adapted, as children always do. The wealthy tried to shield their children. They had nannies, cleaner spaces, more food. But even rich kids lived without antibiotics, without vaccines, Without a basic understanding of how illness worked, childhood diseases were ruthless, and mortality heartbreakingly high. Families had many children, not because they wanted big families, but because they knew only some of those children would survive. Parents couldn't shield their children from diseases they didn't understand, and yet they still fell in love, still married, still raised families. They celebrated birthdays, marked holidays, and dreamed of a better tomorrow. They lived fully human lives in a world that was difficult in ways we can hardly fathom. You're cozy now, settling deeper, with a growing appreciation for all the unseen systems that protect us today. Now let's talk about food, because Victorian food safety was, well, let's just say you'd probably lose some weight if you had to eat like they did. Not because the food was wholesome, but because you'd be too afraid to eat it. Your muscles soften as you think about your refrigerator, clean, cold, reliable, full of food that won't kill you. Back then, refrigeration didn't exist at all. The best people had were ice boxes. And ice? Expensive and difficult to find. Most families just kept food at room temperature and hoped for the best. That meant meat spoiled almost immediately, milk soured within hours, and vegetables rotted faster than you could eat them. So, what did they do? They improvised. And by improvised, we mean they turned to some very questionable solutions. Salt was the primary tool. Meat was packed. In so much salt it was practically mummified. It lasted longer, but became incredibly salty, tough, and offered very little nutrition by the time it reached your plate. Smoking was another method. They'd hang meat in smokehouses for days or even weeks, letting the smoke dry it out and kill some bacteria. It helped preserve it, but came with another cost. People were basically eating charcoal-flavored jerky as a staple protein. A yawn escapes, and you feel deeply thankful for modern food regulations. Pickling was common too. Everything, from eggs to onions to slabs of meat, was dunked in vinegar or salty brine and left for weeks, or longer. Sometimes it worked. The acid killed bacteria, but it also turned everything into vinegar-flavored mush. Imagine months on end of nothing but pickled dinners, your poor digestive system. And when all else failed, people ate food that was already going bad and prayed it wouldn't harm them. If meat turned green, you'd cover it in spice and cook it well. If milk began to curdle, you'd make cheese. If bread molded, you'd slice away the rot and eat the rest. They didn't have strong stomachs by choice. They had to survive. Your breath slows, a gentle rhythm, as you reflect on how much we take safe food for granted. But here's the terrifying part. They couldn't tell what was safe and what wasn't. No expiration labels, no health inspectors, no germ theory. So when they got sick, they blamed bad air, or unlucky fate, or spirits, not the spoiled food on their plates. Milk was especially dangerous. Vendors often diluted it with unclean water. And that water? The same water that everyone else was dumping sewage into. So you'd think you were buying a nutritious drink, but really, you were paying for a mix of contaminated water and trace amounts of milk. Baby formula didn't exist. If a mother couldn't nurse, they gave babies cow's milk, or goat's milk, or anything they could find. Often, it was already spoiled. Digestive illness was one of the leading causes of infant death. And even when food was fresh, preparation posed another threat. Kitchens were filthy, knives rarely washed, surfaces covered in invisible danger. You'd cut raw meat, then slice bread on the same board without rinsing it. Cross-contamination was constant and misunderstood. You're more relaxed now. thinking about all the invisible systems that silently keep us safe each day. But working conditions made it all even harder. If you labored in a factory, you came home covered in chemicals and soot, and then you'd cook with those same hands. Lunch was often eaten right on the factory floor, surrounded by gears, oil leaks, and clouds of toxic fumes. You'd unwrap a piece of bread and eat it while breathing mercury vapor. Miners had it even worse. They spent entire days underground, coated in coal soot or mineral debris, and ate their meals right there in the mine. Black lung was widespread, partly from breathing polluted air while eating. And farm laborers, they spent hours handling manure, both animal and human, then ate their lunches with those same unwashed hands. It's no surprise disease traveled so fast in the countryside. People simply didn't associate cleanliness with health. They believed illness came from sin, misfortune, or something supernatural. The idea that washing your hands before eating could prevent disease was revolutionary. Your shoulders lower, releasing tension, as you quietly appreciate how something as ordinary as hand washing has saved countless lives. Even the wealthy weren't immune to food safety issues. Their cooks may have had more training, but they still worked with the same rotting food and contaminated water as everyone else. The rich could afford more diversity in their meals, but variety didn't always mean safe. They imported delicacies from across the globe, foods that had spent months in warm, damp ship holds with no refrigeration, tropical fruits that decayed from the inside out, spices crawling with insects and mold. And then there were the elaborate Victorian dinner parties, hours-long feasts with dish after dish sitting out at room temperature. By the seventh course, you weren't eating dinner anymore. You were eating a biology experiment. And then there was their fascination with things that were intentionally unpleasant. They ate potted meat, a blend of mystery cuts, fat and spice, left to ferment in a jar. They thought fermentation was refined. Some even consumed cheeses so ripe they were crawling with maggots, and called it a delicacy. Inhale, exhale, and yes, some Victorian delicacies are better left in history. The poor had their own battles. Fresh meat and vegetables were often too expensive, so they bought whatever was cheapest, which usually meant whatever was already going off. Entire markets existed for second-rate food, spoiling meat, wilted produce, expired dairy. These markets thrived because that's all people could afford. And street vendors? They sold pies made of mystery meat, milk left in grimy jugs, and bread so stretched with filler it resembled sawdust. But when you're hungry, you eat what you can get. A contented sigh escapes as you reflect on how food insecurity makes every decision a risk. Alcohol was often safer than water, which led to some unusual eating habits. Beer or wine accompanied every meal, even for children. It wasn't about getting drunk, it was about avoiding illness. Fermented drinks were less likely to make you sick than the local water. So, Victorian children might start the day with small beer, a low-alcohol brew served at breakfast. Adults drank beer through their work shifts to stay hydrated. Even infants were sometimes given watered-down alcohol. It created a culture where mild intoxication was the default state, not quite drunk, but not entirely sober either, which, honestly, probably helped them tolerate the smells and discomforts of everyday life. Spices were prized partly for what they could hide. If meat was turning, you loaded it with pepper and cinnamon and hoped no one noticed. Powerful flavors masked the taste of decay. That's why Victorian food was often intensely spiced compared to earlier eras, not for pleasure, but for survival. Your breath slows, settling into the idea that every meal was a small, daily gamble. Public health regulation was minimal at best. There were no food inspectors, no safety standards, no clean water requirements. Food was stored however people saw fit. Waste was dumped nearby. And if you got sick, well, that was just part of life, bad luck, or a test to endure. The first food safety laws didn't arrive until the very end of the Victorian period, and even then, they were weak, poorly enforced, easily ignored. It took decades of campaigning, from doctors, activists, and reformers, to convince governments that food safety mattered. Before that, it was buyer beware. If a butcher sold you rotting meat swarming with flies, that was perfectly legal. If a baker patted his dough with sawdust to save money, nobody stopped him. Fraud was everywhere in the food industry. Milk was diluted, beer was stretched, bread was mixed with chalk or alum to make it appear whiter. People paid for nourishment and got something else entirely. There was no way to check, no way to verify. You simply had to hope that the person selling it to you wasn't quietly poisoning you for profit. Getting cozy now, muscles softening, as you reflect on how much oversight goes into every single bite we safely consume today. The wealthy tried to shield themselves. They hired food tasters, bought from vendors they trusted. But that didn't always work. The rich got food poisoning too. The difference? They had access to doctors. Poor families, on the other hand, often had no choice. They ate what they could afford, even if it looked suspicious. Better to risk sickness than face certain hunger. Children were especially at risk. Their growing immune systems couldn't keep up with the onslaught of dirty food and water. Digestive disease was a leading cause of child death. Parents watched helplessly as their little ones got sick again and again. From food they were doing their best to provide. Safe, reliable food was a luxury most couldn't even imagine. The gradual rise in food safety during the late Victorian period probably saved more lives than any other public health intervention. Once people could trust their meals, everything changed, health improved, longevity increased. But it took years of science, years of advocacy, and years of slow-moving policy to make those shifts possible. Even then, the changes came unevenly and too slowly for many. That's it. Really relaxing now, thinking about all the unseen structures that quietly protect us today. Personal hygiene standards began to improve too, but like most things, it was slow. The wealthy led the change, partly because they could afford clean water and soap, and partly because social expectations demanded it. Middle-class families began to follow, bathing twice a week instead of once, changing clothes more regularly, buying better grooming products. Still, old ideas held on tightly. Even wealthy families, who could have bathed every day, often didn't, because they'd grown up being told that frequent bathing could make you sick. And the poor were still in survival mode. If you worked 14-hour shifts in a factory and barely earned enough to eat, buying soap or taking time to bathe felt impossible. But society was shifting. Cleanliness started to symbolize morality, respectability, success. If you were dirty, people assumed you were lazy. Or worse, it didn't matter if you were doing your best to survive. So people began to focus on looking clean. They'd scrub their faces, keep their hands tidy, try to keep visible clothes free of stains, and hope no one noticed the rest. Your body feels grounded now, heavy, safe, comfortably resting. As you think about how deeply appearances mattered, even when hygiene was so hard to maintain, the invention of affordable soap changed everything. Early Victorian soap was harsh and pricey, made from lye and animal fat. It could tear up your skin if you used too much. But slowly, manufacturing evolved. Soap became less expensive and far more gentle. For the first time, ordinary people could afford options. Face soap, laundry soap, medicated soap, each one for a specific purpose. No more just using whatever you had. Now, you could choose. Advertising played a major role. Soap companies began tying hygiene to beauty, to health, to status. Billboards and posters told you that being clean wasn't just good for your body, it was good for your reputation. They would show before and after photos of people who looked healthier, happier, more refined after using their soap. They created entire storylines about how being clean could change your social standing. By today's standards, these ads were silly, but they worked. They helped establish a mindset, one where cleanliness was not only desirable, but achievable. Nice and easy now, just breathing and thinking about how marketing can shape an entire culture's habits. Medical understanding was slowly advancing too. The discovery that illness was caused by germs, not foul air, was beginning to gain traction in the medical world, and this changed everything. Doctors began suggesting hand washing, proper wound care, and general cleanliness. It was a shift, a quiet revolution, and to us now, it all seems so obvious. But then, it was transformative. Hospitals started implementing basic cleanliness procedures. They washed surgical tools between patients. They asked doctors to clean their hands. They started isolating contagious cases. And the result? Death rates plummeted. One simple idea, cleanliness, was suddenly saving lives. Your muscles continue to let go, melting into calm. As you think about how much changed when people began to link health with being clean. Schools took up the cause too. Children were taught to wash their hands, brush their teeth, and wear clean clothing. They carried these lessons home, into households that may never have heard them otherwise. And slowly, these small changes spread through entire communities. This was especially important in lower income areas, where grown-ups may not have had access to medical knowledge, but kids could learn in class and teach it at home. Public health campaigns started appearing, posters showing how to wash, how to dispose of waste, how to clean your home, often sponsored by soap companies, yes, but still powerful. The message? Being clean will keep you healthy. And that message was revolutionary. Taking care of your body meant something now. And for the first time, people realized they had a little control over their health. You're sinking deeper now, feeling that warm, safe weight as you think about how empowering that knowledge must have been. But here's what's truly remarkable. Despite all the hardship, despite the daily challenges of staying clean, people still found pride in how they looked. They still fell in love, still married, still raised families, still found laughter and beauty and joy. Your breathing slows, deeper now, softer, as you think about the unbreakable resilience of the human spirit. Victorian women spent hours preparing for special events, even with so few resources. They washed their faces and hands with whatever soap they had. They brushed their hair, sometimes for an hour, working through weeks of residue and oils. They wore their nicest dress, the one they'd protected and patched for months. They added jewelry, or something close to it, a ribbon, a pin. They dabbed perfume, hoping it would last the night. And they felt beautiful, truly beautiful. Because real beauty isn't about flawless hygiene or luxurious products. It's about feeling like yourself, whatever your skin smells like. Yes, wealth brought more options, better soaps, fancier gowns, longer routines, but they still face the same fundamental obstacles. No plumbing, no germ theory, no reliable medicine. A relaxed breath escapes. And you're thinking about how people have always found ways to feel lovely, even when their surroundings were far from it. Rich Victorian women often had help, servants to assist with hair and clothing. But the irony? Those servants were often far dirtier than the people they were cleaning. The ones preserving everyone else's beauty rarely had time or means to tend to their own. Maids spent their days scrubbing other people's clothes, emptying other people's chamber pots, helping other people bathe, only to return home to their own overcrowded, unsanitary housing. Butlers and footmen would polish silver, serve lavish meals, and wear crisp gloves to conceal their own unwashed hands. They maintained perfect posture, spoke with calm manners, while their own bodies ached for rest and basic care. The class system turned cleanliness into a symbol of status. If you could afford soap and time to use it, you were obviously successful. If you were dirty, you were seen as poor and likely morally flawed. So, working-class people felt tremendous pressure to appear clean, even when they couldn't afford to be clean. They washed their hands and faces constantly, kept visible clothing as tidy as possible, and hoped no one looked too closely. Your shoulders drop, softly releasing that weight, as you think about how cruel it is to judge someone's worth by what they couldn't afford to change. But slowly, painfully slowly, things began to shift. The Great Stink of 1858 was a turning point, when the stench from the Thames got so unbearable that even Parliament couldn't function. The government was finally forced to respond. Basilgate's sewer project wasn't just about moving waste. It was about changing how people thought about health and infrastructure. For the first time, people saw that engineering could solve problems that once felt impossible, that public works could make daily life measurably better. When the new sewer system launched and the smell vanished, it felt like magic. People who had grown up breathing foul, contaminated air could finally walk beside the Thames without gagging. Property values soared overnight. Neighborhoods once abandoned were suddenly desirable again. Businesses came back to life. Customers returned. Communities revived. You're getting more comfortable now, sinking deeper into your bed, imagining what it must have felt like to breathe freely after years of rot in the air. The psychological impact was profound. People realized they didn't have to accept misery, that life could get better, that change was possible. This realization sparked a new energy. Urban reform began to take root. Citizens demanded safer homes, cleaner streets, better jobs. They organized, they marched, they spoke out. Women were especially vital in this movement. They were the ones who handled the daily burdens of family hygiene and health. They saw, up close, just how desperately things needed to change. So they stepped forward. They formed organizations for child welfare, for sanitation, for public health. They lobbied for cleaner water, better housing, and accessible medical care. These women were fighting for dignity, for the right to live in homes that didn't make you ill, for the chance to raise children who might live long enough to grow up. Your breath settles now, slower, deeper, as you think about the courage it took to demand change in a world so stubbornly rooted in its ways. Scientific discovery was finally catching up, too. The work of people like Louis Pasteur began to show the truth, that illness was caused by microbes, not immorality or bad smells. This changed everything. For the first time in history, humanity understood why we get sick and what we could do to stop it. Hand washing shifted from a polite social gesture to a medical necessity. Cleaning wounds became a matter of survival, not just appearance. Proper food storage could literally mean the difference between life and death. The implications were profound. It meant that poverty didn't have to equal sickness, that with basic knowledge and simple tools, people could protect themselves. Of course, it took time. Old beliefs lingered. Many clung to traditional explanations for illness, well into the 20th century. But slowly, very slowly, that knowledge began to spread. Schools introduced hygiene lessons. Doctors emphasized prevention alongside treatment. Public health campaigns taught people how to wash, how to clean, how to stay safe. Your eyelids begin to feel heavy. That warm, comforting drowsiness spreading gently through your body. As you think about the steady march toward a cleaner, healthier world. But it wasn't just about hygiene. It was about something deeper. Hope. For the first time in generations, parents could realistically imagine a better life for their children. Child mortality began to decline. Lifespans began to stretch. Diseases that once haunted households became less common. And this created a beautiful cycle. As people got healthier, they had more energy to improve their surroundings. And as conditions improved, they became even healthier. The wealthy took the lead, as they often do. But gradually, those improvements trickled down. Soap became cheaper. Doctors became more available. Public health campaigns began to include everyone. By the close of the Victorian age, London was evolving from one of the dirtiest cities on earth to one of the most sanitary. The skies cleared, the water ran cleaner, the streets were less foul. People could finally walk through the city without holding their breath. They could drink without dread. They could eat with confidence. Your body feels heavier now, deeper in the mattress, as you imagine the awe and relief of living through that transformation. But perhaps the greatest shift of all was psychological. People started to believe that they deserved better, that health and cleanliness were not luxuries, but rights, that every person, no matter their wealth or background, deserved safe living conditions. And that belief didn't fade. It carried forward into housing reform, labor laws, modern medicine. The hygiene revolution was, at its heart, about dignity, about the radical idea that everyone deserves to live in a space that keeps them alive. The people who made these changes happen often didn't live to enjoy them. They spent their days in the same grim conditions they were trying to change. But still, they worked. They believed. They imagined a future where their children and grandchildren might thrive. Your breath slows, your body even softer, as you think about the strength it takes to build something you may never see. There's something quietly powerful about that. People who had so little, taking what little they had and using it to make the world better for someone else. They understood something vital. That disease doesn't care about your income. That helping the poorest helps everyone. The Victorian era showed us that even the most daunting problems can be solved if we apply persistence, science, and the will to act. The Great Stink seemed insurmountable. How do you clean up a city built on centuries of waste? But they figured it out. They built sewers that still work today. Cholera felt unstoppable, a mysterious illness that took lives without warning. But they discovered the cause. They created plans. They saved lives. Your eyelids are heavy now. That calm, settled weight spreads through your limbs, and you reflect on the miracles that are possible when people work toward a shared goal. Now think of your own life. The shower this morning, the clean clothes, the food you trust, the medicine you rely on when you're ill. All of these things exist because someone, long ago, refused to accept that things had to stay broken. They could never have imagined the world you live in. Antibiotics that cure what once killed millions. Water treatment plants that serve entire cities. Food safety regulations now prevent most of the illnesses they endured every day. But they dreamed of something better, a cleaner, healthier world. And they took the first essential steps to make that dream real. Your body feels completely at ease now, heavy and warm against the soft weight of your sheets, as you reflect on the long journey of human progress. And we're still facing some of the same obstacles. Clean water and sanitation remain out of reach in many corners of the world. Poverty still heightens the risk of illness. Inequality still impacts who gets to be healthy and who does not. But we've learned so much. We now grasp ideas that once baffled generations. We have tools, technologies, understanding, and most of all, we have their example. We know that change is not only possible, but inevitable with persistence, creativity, and hope. Your breath is slowing now, deeper, more peaceful. As you settle into the safety of your clean, quiet bed, think for a moment how different your evening has been from theirs. You brushed your teeth with gentle toothpaste and a soft brush. You washed your face with warm water. You dressed in clean, comfortable clothes. You drank water without fear. You ate food without doubt. You lie in a bed with fresh linens, in a room filled with clean air, in a home with proper plumbing. Each of these small comforts are quiet victories, the result of centuries of effort. The Victorians who fought for these improvements would be astonished, and they'd be proud. They might laugh at how often we bathe, but they'd understand why it matters. Your eyelids grow heavier. That serene, sleepy feeling flows through you as you become more aware of all the unseen systems working quietly to keep you safe. You are lying in a clean bed, breathing purified air, in a warm room free from smoke and sewage. Your body is at ease, your stomach is full, your skin is clean. These are gifts, hard-earned, passed down by millions who never saw the results. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you are the beneficiary of generations of hope and sacrifice and vision. Your breath settles into rhythm, in and out, as your body gently prepares for rest. Let your muscles unwind completely, starting from your toes to your feet, your calves, your thighs, just letting go. Your hips and stomach sink deeper. Your arms go soft by your side. Your shoulders drop, releasing the tension of the day. Your neck loosens. Your jaw unclenches. Your face is peaceful. And your eyelids, so heavy now, ready to close. Let them close. That's it. Just resting now. Your breath becomes deeper, more effortless. You are safe. You are clean. You are comfortable. Wrapped in layers of quiet protection you don't even see. Your thoughts are quiet. Your mind is floating now, far from the struggle of the past, drifting peacefully into the present, where the air is pure, where the water is safe, where your bed is soft and still, just breathing, gently, easily, letting go of the day, letting go of the thoughts, letting yourself rest. Your body knows how to sleep. It knows how to heal, how to restore. You don't have to do anything. Just let go and drift deeper and deeper into peaceful rest, where your dreams are calm and your sleep is full, safe, clean, whole, drifting now into the soft arms of rest. That's it. Just letting go and sinking deeper and deeper into healing sleep. Sleep well.